Welcome to the Apex Racing TV Weekly Roundup podcast, your surefire way of keeping up to date with all of Apex Racing TV's broadcasted series. This week, we discuss the inaugural round of the SimRacersWorld Endurance Series, the opening week of the Formula 3.5 and IndyCar Road Series, and the final round prior to the showdown of the Apex Racing League Touring Car Championship. So let's jump into the action with your hosts Sam Fitzpatrick and Marco Barbanero. Welcome back, Marco, once again to the Apex Racing TV Weekly Roundup podcast. And we have started 2020 Season 1, the starting of a few new series, particularly official series, and a couple of league series as well. And it sets up a fantastic 12 weeks on Apex Racing TV, and we can start looking at the round ones today.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a great start of the season. Nice to be in 2020 already. And I have to say, we started with a bang basically during what was iRacing's week 13. But the guys at SimRacersWorld took to the track on the Sunday of week 13 to begin their brand new endurance series. And what a race it was!
Yes, absolutely. So this was the SimRacersWorld Endurance Championship, sponsored by Abruzzi's Racing, of course. Check out Abruzzi's products, customizable gloves and all types of racing equipment. Really do recommend it. Quite a fantastic item. But yeah, was the Endurance Series, GT3, TCR, and Porsche Cup cars for this, and at Barcelona for race one of the season. In the GT3 class, it was a terrific battle, wasn't it, Marco? Particularly in the first couple of hours. I mean, really had three different teams who could take it. T3 Motorsports Sim Racing and Newman Sim Racing, who ended up fighting for the title anyway. But also, Meraki Racing were very competitive as well. It was surprising in a way that we only had just over 10 teams for a 6-hour race. However, the first 2 hours, like I said, when there were three teams fighting for the win and another couple as well who you felt as they could maybe challenge late on in the event, that was absolutely enthralling to watch.
It was absolutely. It was very sad that Meraki couldn't complete the race after getting. They had that very long uh, penalty that they didn't serve. So instead of serving a drive through the pits, they had to serve a 30-second stop and go. And then they decided to retire their car, unfortunately. But apart from that, it was very exciting. And traffic played a big part in the fight for the win. In the end, T3 were the best in that sense that they were able to manage the traffic with calmness, and get to the end of the race with a convincing victory in round one. It was beautiful to see the way iRacing really has developed over the years, because we started the race at 10 a.m. in sim time, and of course finished it 6 hours later. So it was beautiful to see the change in illumination of the track, the angle of the sun, the cloud cover come and go. Uh, I don't I don't want to lie. It was an endurance event for us as well, of course, covering it. But in the end, it was a big personal, satisfaction to be able to bring the race home. Me, you, and Lee Thompson, of course. And I have to say, we managed to navigate through it, both thanks to the drivers putting on a good show, and of course there's a plenty to talk about, especially during week 13, of course, in the quote unquote dull moments of the race. And so it was a very pleasant broadcast to bring to you spectators at home.
Absolutely. So that was the GT3 class, as Marco was saying. T3 Motorsports winning out Newman Sim Racing in second, and Beauty Simsport rounding out the top three. Quite a unique point scoring system. First to second is 5 points, and then second to third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth are all 5 points in between each one, and so the points can go down quite drastically. So finishing on the podium can be quite an advantage compared to, say, finishing in sixth place. So it's a very good start to the season for those guys. In the Porsche class, it was a bit of a strange event, Marco. It was one of them where team kind of had a bit of a pro-am combination. You had Martin van Liesnold, one of the fastest drivers in all of iRacing. He certainly proved that over time. And he was racing with, was it Steve or Pim Bow, perhaps,
He
who
was
was racing?
racing with Rob Thiessen.
Rob Thiessen, apologies. Those two were racing with one another, and Thiessen had a little bit of a deficit to Van Liesnold. But it turned out to be a really exhilarating race with RSR Esports. And I mean, what could have been with that race? Because RSR Esports got 31 incidents, two more than they were allowed, and it meant that they got a drive-through penalty. And in the end, they finished 12 seconds off the lead. A drive-through was costing the drivers about 13 to 14 seconds. So he could have had an almighty battle with Van Liesnold catching them in the closing stages. Unfortunately, we were denied that, but it was still really entertaining because it was so topsy-turvy. It seemed like when Van Liesnold was in the car, RevMatch had it under control, and then they'd swap drivers, and all of a sudden RSR would come back. So it was really entertaining to watch.
Yeah, we were sure that in the end a pit stop would have cost RSR the lead, but if you remember, the pit stop was well played out by them. Sadly, that penalty really cost them a lot, and so we were deprived of a fantastic fight. But still, the tension, to come after 6 hours and have what was a relative close finish which kept us on the edge of our seats until the end of the race. Was super exciting. Nomad with Barry Bird and Simon Underhill finished in third place. We expect to see more Porsches in the next few rounds, either being the GT3 Cup car or the newly minted GT4, which will come to iRacing in the March build. And it has already been announced for some of the Enduros later down the line, the official Enduros by iRacing. So I think the consensus is the car will come in the next release, and since we have one race per month in this championship, we might have in the back end of the season, some new entries in that class, so would be interesting to see how they will deal with the TCR cars. In real life, in the IMSA Michelin Pilot Challenge, the slower Porsche GT4s or GT4s in general tend to, stomp their feet with the fastest TCR. So it's going to be both in the official series and in the series that will use these categories, including, of course, this one, an interesting balance to strike between. We know we can add in private session weight penalties to some cars, but still, it will be interesting to see because interestingly enough, in this race, usually we see TCR the closest fight in all of the racing series, and of course in the ARL TCR that we broadcast on Thursdays. But it was the biggest margin of victory of the day, the one in TCR.
Yes, Texans Pitstone Motorsport, who won out in relatively dominant fashion. They were ahead of T3 Motorsport, SimSport, and Talk Freak finished in third place. Talk Freak were running quite strong in the early stages, actually led much of the first couple of hours. Fortunately, something affected them because they had two strong drivers, so too did Texans Pitstone Motorsport. So that could have been quite an incredible battle, but unfortunately, Talk Freak just getting shuffled down still. Some decent points for them. Great shame as well for RevMatch Academy. They put it on pole position by about half a second. Pinball was in that car. But they got pole position, and then right from the get-go, I think maybe even struggling to get to the grid, or maybe getting a crash on the opening lap, and they had to go back to the pits. Massive credit for them, though. They lost 3 laps there, and they still completed the whole 6 hours, just trying to peg back a couple of positions, which they did manage to do. I think finished in 5th place in the end. But yeah, I think that could have been a mega tight battle, Marco. And on paper, I'd say possibly that was the tightest battle in all of the classes, that Pitstone Motorsport, Talk Freak, and Rev Match battle. So hopefully next time at Daytona, we'll see that renewed.
This was the only class where the pole position and the fastest lap were set by two different teams. In GT3, it was Newman Sim Racing with pole and fastest lap. You get 1 bonus point per each of them. In the Porsche, it was the rev match guys. But here, the pole, of course, went to rev match, like you were saying, and the fastest lap to Texan Fitztime Motorsport. It would have been a Titanic scrap. The guys of rev match were lapping 4 seconds quicker than most of the TCR field by the end of the race, desperately trying to claw back, and they ended up finishing in 7th position in the end. They lost those 4 laps. Basically, they had a connection issue straight as the gridding process was getting done, and they lost 4 laps trying to get back into the car. So it was absolutely a terrible bit of luck for them. But on the other side of the spectrum, the Texans car, I mean, I want to know what you put in that car, Sam, because that car was hit 2 or 3 times very hard and still made it to the finish line without a scratch. We know that the TCR car is basically a tank with 4 wheels and front wheel drive, but still, that car took some serious hits, and in the end, it was barely with a scratch, and basically a 1 minute, if I'm not mistaken, margin of victory was absolutely the perfect job from McClay and Bibby.
Yeah, one of my biggest disappointments about season one was the fact that the TCR car didn't have the knee damage model. You see, I always assumed that when they were designing the TCR car before it was released, that they designed it for the knee damage model, but maybe a couple of things weren't quite ready, so they just put it on the old damage model and just for temporarily for a season. Maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe they always designed it with the old damage model, which makes you question what on earth were they thinking when they made it indestructible up there, because that thing, I mean, it also in terms of the aero damage, I think with GT3 cars, for example, you know, you crumple the bonnet a little bit, they can be quite sensitive to that, and it really affects the top speed. With the TCR car, it just doesn't seem to deform whatsoever. It's a freak of nature, seemingly, is that Audi, and I really hope that it gets fixed quite soon. However, it does mean in an endurance race like that means that the drivers have a little bit of a better chance as the meeting goes on. So wasn't too bad for that, and we had plenty of finishes. Pretty good attrition rate in that race. I think, Marco, it was the first time that we've really seen the drive-throughs for for instance, be applied. Of course, manually this time. A wise decision probably by Ian Reitz to do that manually. So every 30 instance you got a drive-through penalty rather than an outright disqualification. Each drive-through cost you about 14 seconds. And I'd say, Marco, it works quite well. I don't think there was too many issues with it. It's not a massive penalty. However, it is still advantageous not to exceed the track limits. So it's quite a nice balance. I think iRacing could have potentially had it where, for example, you get maybe a minute stop and hold for every 30 instance, for example. Or they could have had it, you know, mega minor where you just get maybe a drive through every 100 instance. I'd say that mix that they've got, especially with these special events coming up as well, is about right. I'm quite impressed by.
Yes, absolutely. I saw the iRacing special event calendar earlier, and I think it works very well the way they have designed it. So, I mean, poor Ian had to do all the race control duties on his own earlier during the day, but it worked brilliantly for him, and it was very nice to keep us up to date during the event as well. And of course, giving you the admin power so you could check the incident situation for all the teams, and it was again it made the end of the race very tense, especially for that Porsche Cup battle. In the end, it proved to be the decisive factor in the victory for ref match.
Yes, so that was the SimRacersWorld Endurance Championship that will return in 3 weeks' time, as providing that this podcast is released relatively soon. 3 weeks from the 15th of December, basically. So that will be at Daytona. Another 1,000 kilometers. Quick word on Daytona, actually, Marco, because it's a classic endurance circuit. It'll be at night as well with that race. 164 laps. Should be a little bit quicker than Barcelona was, just a bit of a higher average speed across all these events, 1,000 kilometers rather than a time limit. And yeah, Daytona's just a classic endurance circuit. It's a good place to go to round two. This is a very sensible calendar, I'd say, put together by the admins. All these tracks have decent amounts of runoff, and Daytona will be a good test for the drivers. A circuit that potentially the Porsche and the TCR drivers may not have too much experience around, perhaps, with that combination.
It's a track that I absolutely love. One of my favorites, especially since it's despite being an infield road course, it's very iconic and basically it signals the beginning of the endurance season, both in iRacing and in real life. Yes, I know Dubai starts earlier, but you know what I mean. Daytona is, I think, I wait every year the 24 hour of Daytona more than I wait the 24 hour of Le Mans. So it has a special connection to me. Glad that it is now in the schedule of this championship. It will be interesting to see, especially in the infield section, because we saw that the speed difference between the TCR and the GT3 is actually massive, but also on the very long and high banks of Daytona and the big straights, the Porsches are faster than the GT3s. So it will pose some interesting questions, especially if a GT3 is trying to pass a Porsche Cup car, but then they end up into that terrible first corner, very tough, where maybe the Porsche will have the advantage on speed, but will have terrible brakes. And I think we might see a problem or two there, especially because the Porsches tend to be, like I say, very, very unstable during the braking. But on the other hand, these massive straights will really help them. So it will make for some interesting decisions by the drivers. And if you crash and you hit the wall in the oval, you tend to bounce back on the track. It will be a tough race for these drivers, also at night. So even exciting stuff for the viewers, etc. It make for a big race atmosphere. So yeah, really cannot wait for the second round of the championship.
Yeah, definitely. And thanks to everyone who tuned in for round one of our most popular broadcasts in the past 12 months, really, of 2019. Over 1,200 views on that. So mega appreciate it on our own channel. And you can catch the next round of the Abruzzi Sim Racers World Endurance Series in 3 weeks' time at Daytona for round two of the season. So next up, we will talk about another broadcast that we both did. It's been very easy this week, I must say, Marco. The fact that we've done three, each one of us have done 3 of these 4 broadcasts, which is absolutely easy. Makes our life a lot easier. It also means that we actually roughly know what we're talking about for once. This was the Formula 3.5 series then. This week at Monza, round 1 of the season. Fantastic that we're renewing this championship, which we broadcasted all 12 weeks of last season. And it's absolutely fantastic to commentate on. So week 1 this time comes from Monza, and it was Tim Delisle back in town looking to defend his championship. And he dominated, Marco. It was absolutely impressive from him. I mean, new tire model, some changes to the car, not affecting him whatsoever. He's still his dominant self.
Yes, even though he talked to us after the race and said that he had a little bit of trouble during the week getting used to this big change, and only in the last day preceding the race he really got basic understanding of what the new tires were doing. I like the format that they're using for this league, because they will be basically using the points. The points, they will basically create, I think, alternate standings from what is the official series. They will use the points of the race given by iRacing, but they will make their own standings. So it's a very nice way of making the series work, despite being an official series, of course, on the using the iRacing official series system. But I mean, the race on Saturday evening was absolutely fantastic. We saw Team Delisle ran away thanks also to some trouble for his main rivals, but behind him, the mid pack and also around the top 5, top 10. It was constant passing, and great battles, great defending. Monza is a track that really plays into this kind of racing. It was very entertaining up until the very last lap where we had also a change for the podium.
Yeah, so Dalal, I mean, just ran away very much from the start. In second, third, and fourth was Olsen, Pinsker, and Ilbrink. However, Olsen going into a sky ran into. Also, apologies, Pinsker going into a sky ran into the back of Olsen, leaving Ilbrink nowhere to go, and that was a massive issue for all three of them. Pinsker and Olsen pretty much out on the spot. Ilbrink with significant damage recovered brilliantly back up to, I believe, P.
12.
14 by the P12 even by the end of the race was pretty miraculous after having to come into the pits. But you're absolutely right. Incredible battles up and down the field. I mean, yeah, the driver who I think had the most entertaining race was Thomas Knoll. He's usually a driver who qualifies a little bit further down outside the top 10. This time he qualified up in P6, I believe. I think was running as high as 5th perhaps in the early stages. And then I think just had an incredibly frustrating race, Marco, where he seemed to constantly get onto the back of the driver ahead, look to perhaps make a move, and then he'd just be shoved a little bit wide through the chicane. And because there was a driver constantly half second behind him, he'd then lose out. And it was pretty much rinse and redo, where just that happened to him constantly through the race. I think ended up outside the top kind of 14 drivers, so 14th or 15th, I believe. So really does show the competitiveness of that midfield. I don't think I've ever seen such a competitive midfield in that in that series.
You know, he's getting his money's worth. Of course, he's the main promoter of getting this series broadcasted by us and also getting it on the iRacing Esports Network. So he basically got the crowdfunding going. So it's getting his money's worth again. And it was very nice to see the work that these guys have done. It's very difficult for a series, for a community to come together because everyone wants to be broadcasted, but no one wants to put the money in it. So I was actually very surprised when I saw that these guys were able to get the money for the series and to have it on the Racing Esports Network. Must be, this car, it's beautiful. It has been killed by iRacing, sadly. We talked about this issue in the previous episodes. So to have 3 splits made by the broadcasted race and the excitement, the action we saw on the racetrack made it a perfect start of the season. And of course, next week going to a drastically different track in Laguna Seca. We'll put these drivers on the spot. We talked with Tim Delisle, and he was talking about how prone to mistakes you can be in that track, especially we described the new tires, of course, the DRS, which makes the car very unstable when you try to turn, even in the straight. So it will make for some very interesting viewing, and of course the big prime time almost spot in what is effectively a Saturday night in Europe, and we had participation from all over the world on Saturday, so it made for a beautiful experience. I think the drivers had a lot of fun, even though some of them were involved in a bit of a mess here and there. But also for us commentating, it was a very nice way to start the season. And the people, I think, liked it a lot, by judging by the numbers of views that we had, basically both live and on demand.
Yeah, over 50 viewers, pretty much for the entire race. Over 700 views now as we speak. Also, 29 likes and 0 dislikes. I'm sure someone who's listening to this podcast will put down a dislike now just to ruin that. I mean, it's very weird when we get dislikes on videos because it has no correlation into how good the video actually is, unless we truly do mess up, which, to be fair, is quite regularly. But no, good that there were no dislikes. Good that there were no trolls this time. That's really fantastic, that. So Tim Delisle won out. Francesco Fiorini, Joe, who we haven't seen too much of in the past, finished in second place. Only 11 seconds off the lead. I mean, against Delisle, that's a great effort. And also, he was car number 11 out of 18, so a lower iRating as well. Amal Yunus was in third place, half a minute off the lead. He held off Augusto and the Bosca, Novsak, Mataruccio, who had a dreadful final lap. I mean, let's talk about Mataruccio. Sorry, Alexis, another guy who we haven't seen too much of in the past. And you know what it reminded me of? It was Sebastian Bourdais, 2008 Spa, where he was running up in third place, going on to the last lap. And he, of course, this was when it was raining, and all of a sudden he went from third down to seventh on the last lap of the race and was in tears afterwards. I'm sure Alexis wasn't too bad, but it was that similar thing where once again he kind of got he made one mistake down at the opening chicane, and then pretty much for the rest of the lap was just offline, kept on getting shoved out, and in the end he was fortunate to finish even in seventh place.
Exactly. Yes, he really he just basically drives this car full time. I see he does a little bit of races in the F3 as well, but mostly in the 3.5. That must have been really painful for him because otherwise it was a spotless race from his side. He will have plenty of chances to maybe have a redemption starting from next week, but this will be a frustrating week for him, especially thinking about the fact that he had basically the podium in his pocket, and it's never nice to make a mistake and then getting freight trained by the rest of the field. Luckily for him, it was only one lap on the other side, so at a certain point his position losses stopped, but really not the ideal way to start the season. Uh, let's see what happens in the next race for him because he will really be looking forward to redeem himself next week at Laguna Seca.
Definitely. So you can catch that round at Laguna Seca. What a fascinating car track combination that's going to be. We got some criticism when we had GTE and GT3 cars around there. Imagine 3.5 cars will be very entertaining. Catch that at 10 GMT or 22 GMT on the iRacing Esports Network next Saturday. And of course, you can catch every round of that championship at that same time slot for the next 11 weeks. So, now we've got our little segment on iRacing, Mark K. I mean, we've had so much to talk about for the past few weeks. In terms of kind of proper concrete stuff we can talk about, the special events calendar has been released, and it always draws a bit of controversy, does this, because there's so many different kind of areas on iRacing, different cars on iRacing, that every community just wants their own special event to be represented. Unfortunately, some have to be cut. Not a massive change this season. I mean, off the top, I'm just looking at at the list now. I don't really notice too much difference. Maybe Darlington 500 and Indy 400, maybe Charlotte 600 as well. Not or there this time. Also, no Raw and no Glen 6 hours. That's kind of what I notice at least, and some controversial car lineups as well for Nürburgring 24 hours. No Porsche Cup car. So, I mean, what other elements would you say are quite noteworthy about this this calendar, Marco? Is there anything that you feel that iRacing have perhaps missed this season?
Off the top of my head, a big bit of a disappointment for the Aurora 24 that is going to, because it was always a fun race to do, especially in January. It's super cold outside, bad weather. It's a nice way to spend 2.4 hours of your afternoon, and you get cars that are not really used by iRacing in that race. Usually you see the Mustang, etc. No? Of course, it would have been perfect because it is, you could have used the TCR car, for example, this year. But apart from that, really surprised by the omission of the Porsche Cup car from the 24 hours of the Nürburgring. Really surprised by that. Nice to see the Bathurst 1000 coming back. I think last season it was not raced. The NIS races, I think they will be. I remember they used to have also Bristol in. I don't know why they put them there, the NIS races, because they make part of their own calendar. So I don't know why they are there. I know that they have a limited number of full distance races because usually NIS is half the distance. So Daytona would be 250, but it has always been the full 500 miles. I think, yes, Darlington is the first time we have the full distance, and it will make for an interesting race because Darlington starts at sunset and ends at night, and for the first hour or so you have the sun straight in your face getting into one of the corners, so it makes for a very, very tough race. And like we were saying earlier, it will be interesting to see how it works with the new incident system. There will be no more disqualifications in the special events, but after a certain amount of incident points you get a drive-through, and then every 20 incident after that you get another and another and another. So it will be different. For example, Daytona, Nürburgring, Le Mans, and Spa, the 24-hour races will be 100 incidents, 50 for the shorter races, but after that 20 no matter where you are racing. Of course, that is not considering NIS races. And of course the Chili Bowl, which will be done as a super session that will be held later down the line in late December with a super session inside, I would think, the official iRacing series for the dirt midget car. A beautiful event which I would love to take part in. Something that is missing also, it's the Volusia late model special event, which I took part in last year, finishing 10th in the second split, might I add. Because I fancy myself as a terrible driver, but a terrible driver in every kind of race car. But, sometimes, and it was super fun. It was one of the longest events I've ever, because we had the qualifiers, then the heat, and the semi-finals, and then the final. But it was so exciting, Sam, because every race you knew you had to hit a certain marker in the field to get promoted and into the next session. And actually, I got eliminated from one, but I was able to make it through in the consolation race. It was so exciting. So it's a bit sad to not have it, in the schedule. I'm sure maybe the communities will organize something as a hosted session, but it is always nice to have something official in iRacing because I don't know, it makes it feel a little bit more important for me.
Definitely. I mean, for me, I mean 6 hours at the Glen. I mean that is pretty much my favorite event, just because 6 hours it's a really nice length. You can kind of sprint, but at the same time, it's still a decent length race. And fantastic cars. It's not too long a circuit, so you got lots of lapping other classes and stuff. So personally, I'm really disappointed that's not on there this time. I'd also like to see just occasional less significant races being included. So, for example, Zolder 24, or maybe a random round of the World Endurance Championship. Maybe like well, not even sure if Nürburgring's even on the World Endurance Championship calendar anymore, but just have an occasional, round
Monza
which
will
is
be
just
back.
Monza will be back. There you go. So you could have one there, just one of them each year, which is only ever going to be there for 1 year. It's not a massive event, but just highlight a little bit of a different event just to mix it up a little bit, because I feel like these events are getting a little stale by now, and it's not every year that you have a brand new event in real life motorsports. But they've covered the majority. Also going to be interesting, that the fact that they've had the exact same instant limits for the 24-hour races. So I'd say it's a lot easier to stay under 100 instants at, say, Nürburgring, where if you go off the circuit, I mean, you're going to crash before you pick up an instant round to the Nordschleife, because the curbs are absolutely lethal. And then, of course, you've got Spa, where you've got drivers who have got 1,000 incidents around that circuit in the past. So it'll be fascinating to see how the drivers deal with that. And of course, Spa, longest pit lane in all of iRacing with the
Yeah.
enduro layout as well. So that's going to be an insane penalty. I mean, we're talking about Barcelona, 14 seconds you lost doing that. I mean, at Spa, it's going to be 30 seconds at least. So that will be quite a penalty. Going to be quite hilarious to see. Perhaps I know that maybe the race leaders losing out on something like that right at the end. Was there anything else, Mark K, that has happened in iRacing this week? I mean, we can discuss a little bit about the new tire model and stuff. I'm actually at my rig finally, so I can give some kind of analysis, even though I am absolutely hopeless. But everything else, not too much announced, I'd say.
There has been a hot fix for the Season 1 release, which also then will be complemented by the first patch, which will come out on December the 18th. No news on the release notes for that. But we have had some big changes, especially coming from the V7 tire models. You saw during week 13, I'm sure, some videos of especially the new V8s, but not only those, flipping over for no reason, and that was an issue with the tire model. It has been it has been it has been fixed, and also all the V7 tire model cars will start with tire warmers. So this is
Awesome.
done in an effort to mimic warm-up laps, which we don't have in iRacing for standing starts. So this was an interesting thing to do. The MX-5 got a little bit of boost with the new engine, which it's a bit more powerful. But apart from that, no major changes. I'm expecting something more in. There's a very very annoying bug with the F3 right now, where if you tow back to the pits, there is a good chance that fast repair will not be used, and you will be basically sitting there with the car, and also if you try and jump out and back into the car, you will blow your engine, which is, you shouldn't crash in the first place, of course, mind you, but still, it is not ideal. But yeah, I have to say I'm absolutely in love with the new tire model on some cars. The F3 and the Skippy, of course, already had it, but having a lot of fun with other cars as well. Not so much with the MX-5. I find it very, very slippery even after some laps. It will, new tire model and more powerful engine on that car will take some time to get used to it. But yeah, of course, AI still making for a fun race every once in a while. I'm really, really, really enjoying it. But yeah, let's see what's in these. Hot fixes are smaller in content. Of course, I'm expecting some bigger changes and fixes in the upcoming patch later down the line this week.
Yeah, and I've also heard that the V8 supercar, a little bit of a tweak on that, where it's been given a little bit less downforce since it was
Yes, now you know
originally
why I was
released.
able to do a few laps at Spa without crashing during my test last week. There was something wrong with the car.
I mean, apparently, according to Jay McKnight, I was doing a V8 supercar event, which I won, by the way. I haven't even told you this, Marco. I won something. I won the whole event.
Ah,
Other drivers didn't turn up in the end. But I mean, it doesn't matter.
a
I still
win is a
beat a
win.
couple of drivers. A win is a win. Not as impressive as your Seeding 12 Hours win,
Mhm.
obviously.
Which, of
But
course, now I know the date when I will have to defend my crown next
of
year. So,
course. I mean, is Lewis Hamilton signed up yet to the team?
we're trying. We're trying. I don't want to share the spotlight with too many drivers. So.
Oh, of course, yeah.
But most important, I got a thumbs up from my partner in crime from last year. So we are
Awesome.
going to be there and defend the title. Then, if anyone wants to jump on the bandwagon, they are more than welcome.
I mean, I think I'm going to be away for that, unfortunately, seeing that it's in March. I'm absolutely. I might just have to come back for the weekend, to be fair, to do Seeding. That'll be a great event. Anyway, I was talking about the V8 supercars, and yeah, Jay McKnight was not best pleased with the changes that have been made. In fact, he's driven a V8 supercar in real life, so apparently it was absolutely on point previously, but has been changed. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. I think over the next season or so. But that's pretty much all the iRacing news, and certainly keep your eyes peeled for next week's podcast in case there are any new announcements. So we'll talk about our second league series now, the ARL TC Championship. This week from Watkins Glen, crucially, the final week before the showdown. In terms of the actual meeting, though, it was a fantastic meeting. I was drafted in to lead commentate for it, and it was absolutely enthralling. A fantastic slipstream effect, and the TCI car. I don't know if it's just because the drives are insanely close. I'm sure they are, but also the toe effect just means that they was overtaking constantly every single lap. So race one, Jack Sedgwick pulled off an absolute masterclass. He waited behind Nick Foggy for pretty much the entire event. Didn't bother fighting him. A little bit of bump drafting as well as the race progressed. And he managed to overtake Nick Foggy at the carousel on the last lap of the race. And yeah, one else. Daniel McNally was top of the AM drivers. In race 2, there were a couple big pileups on lap 2. I'm still going through the stewarding, and any ARL drivers who are watching this back or listening to this back and want to know what the final showdown results are and are being hesitated due to mine and the other stewards' non-urgency, I do apologize. They will be done, I'm sure, by the time that this podcast is released. But a couple of big parts, neither were really caused by any judge, so no penalties given for that. Ross McFarlane beat Dan Kraft with a couple of ambitious moves on the last lap. I don't think Kraft was best pleased, but he still managed to win out Paul Smith, top of the AM drivers. And then race 3 was insanely entertaining. Dave Baker managed to hold off Ash Sutton, who was on a charge, getting 20-odd places, I think, with some ridiculous overtaking moves that Ash Sutton was pulling off. Nick Foggy rounded out the podium, and Richard Wormingham was the top amateur driver. Margaret, did you see any of Thursday's events?
Yes, and I have to say that I'm really impressed by Foggy's driving throughout the day. In the end, he did not come home with a win, but he got, I think, second, fourth, and third in the 3 races, which is always a valuable amount of points, and getting with some momentum into the showdown. But as per usual, this series is so entertaining, and the quality of the field, and despite being so big, the field is such a big quality, which is something that's not very usual, no? Usually, the bigger the field, the bigger the chaos, which we had in bits and pieces, but also some fantastic races all around. And like I said, this track also is one of the best, if not the best, for this kind of racing. Very entertaining racetrack, Watkins Glen. With it is the most the most popular road course in iRacing that is not free. In fact, the Spec Racer Ford, the car that you will love after what happens on Saturday,
Of course, yeah.
it includes it in their rotation as a free track, because everyone has Watkins Glen basically. So yeah, I mean, perfect ingredient, perfect races as well. I like the format of the championship. And now, what do you think the showdown has in place for us starting from next week?
I mean, I'm just looking at the standings now to see who's qualified. So Nick Foggy was top of the drivers in the normal season. Jack Sedgwick in second place. Ross McFarlane was the leader for a while, only just up in the end, in third place. There was Baker, Kraft, Rushworth, Simmons, Cooper, Howard, and Wood. So those drivers get through. Chris Wood beat Alex Simpson by 1,685 points to 1,683 points. 2 points in it. Absolutely mad. I do not. Oh, that's not even a pun as well, but that would be a very good one. I don't think any of those top 10 drivers got any penalties, but I have yet to complete them. So if Chris Wood has wrecked half the field in race 3, then he will not make it. I think he is okay though. And a couple of drivers who got lots of race victories will also get through. So Ash Sutton, I'm almost certain will get through because of the amount of race wins he got, and he just about did enough rounds as well. Also, Wojciech Sawidovic, 5-time champion. He won at least 3 races, maybe even 4 races, and I think he might get in as well. But that's not confirmed. I'm sure the standings will be out next week. In the amateur standings, Adam Hedgecock and Kip Stevens were joint top. Richard Warmingham a very close third as well. There's Woodhouse, Blake, Smith, Van Broek, and Roberts, who will almost certainly be in. Then a decent gap back actually to Simon Field, 3 boosted drivers in a row there. I'm not sure who got the best results out of those guys in terms of who will get the couple of wildcard places, but it's very difficult to call. Shall we call this, Mark? I don't know if you've got the standings in front of you right now. But shall we call who's going to win each championship?
Too difficult, I think, so far. Maybe next week we can have a better idea and go with a prediction, because any one of those drivers can bring home their respective class title.
Awesome. Okay. Also, I feel like if I predict something, seeing that I am deciding some of the stewarding, I may have a special interest. Not that I don't already, of course. I mean, everyone knows the money launching that goes around Apex Racing Leagues. In terms of the Teams Championship, the 5 pro teams who will qualify for the showdown will be Apex Racing Team, Sim Sports Racing USA, XVR Sim Racing, CQR, and V Racer. And the 4 AM teams will be Smile Time Simultor, Boosted Motorsport, Boosted Sim Sport, and Automech Knock Hill. Not too much change in those standings going into the final rounds of the showdown. So that was the Apex Racing League Touring Car Championship. Watch that next Thursday on the iRacing Esports Network. Then there'll be a couple of weeks break. Of course, Monza on Thursday will be the first race of the showdown. The points will be reset for the top 10 in the pro standings and top 8 in the AM standings. And it will be insanely entertaining to watch. Will be mega close. Those 4 showdown races. So finally, we will talk about the IndyCar Road Series. I didn't catch too much of this, Mark. I saw the results. Just take us through what happened at Road America on Friday.
Yeah, very, very tough race for all the drivers. To have it as the first round of the season, of course, after week 13. And it was great to see the race split. So there was big participation. And in the end, also Adam Hedgecock made his Apex debut in the booth on Friday night. So he did a very, very good job. But in the end, it was a race that it was similar to what happened in the 3.5 in the sense that a couple of the big names, the big guns of the race, were involved in a crash straight away. Henry Bennett, last year's champion, was involved in a crash in the first few laps, and together with him also involved in that mess was AJ Burton, who had a brake failure. Mark Asher was involved in that as well. So that's 3 big names out of the picture in the first lap. I mean, Bennett was able to come back but still finish 1 lap down. And this made it possible for Adam Blocker to put on a show for us there at the front of the field, setting the fastest lap of the race in the last lap of the race, despite being almost 30 seconds in front of an excellent Chris On, who had a good pace, but I don't think he got his strategy out right quite on point, because he was forced to save some fuel. And third place was for Will Lamb. He finished just 1/10 of a second in front of Chris Bauman, who then had to settle for P4. They were basically tied coming out of the last corner. It was a drag race to the finish. Fantastic. Andrea Seck finished in 5th. Dalle Donne finished in 6th place after having to start from the pits, because whilst on the grid he forgot to put his race setup in. He had this qualifying setup, so he couldn't make it back in time. But that was proved to be a win-win for us, because he put on his classic show coming back from the field. John Downing rounding up the top 10. A disappointing race for him, but I think he's waiting for the ovals. High attrition. Not many. There was only one pile up, and that was because, of course, Burton's brakes failed on the first lap. But apart from that, it was there was a lot of single car mistakes, lots and lots of errors. But you know the way this series works. Of course, some drivers try to survive on the road, and then they put all their cars on the table on the ovals, and vice versa. And speaking of ovals, of course, we will have a big one next time around in Pocono. Of course, the series alternates. One season we have Indianapolis and Auto Club Speedway, and the next season we have Pocono and Michigan. So this is the season with Pocono and Michigan, and Pocono will be next. It's a beautiful, beautiful schedule. It will bring us to Spa on Christmas week. Don't want to miss that. It's going to be a lot of people from other series, we think. Then Richmond, my favorite oval, together with Iowa, also on the schedule later down the line. And the Homestead doubleheader, basically in the middle of January, will be something else. So I think it was a great start to the season. It was very, very well liked by the viewers. So the drivers, of course, are very thankful about having the series being broadcast, and they made a very, very good job, the community, by voting this calendar in. So, I mean, you know, I'm an oval guy. I cannot wait for Pocono. If you remember the real life races there, Sam, exceptional racing, 4-5 wide. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah, it should be pretty epic. That is that one. Is that the free Pocono then, or is there even a free Pocono? Because I know there was the road course released quite recently.
There is
But
a
is
free
that
Pocono,
yeah? But they're
but
running the paid one, are they?
they are running the new one, which is better because it is, in my opinion, because it is repaved, so it's not as bouncy as the old one. So you were really fighting with the steering wheel in Pocono, remember, which is great, very exciting. But you know, the new one is a bit better in my opinion, for the IndyCar at least.
And of course, looking towards the rest of the season, do you think there's going to be a good kind of championship battle? I'm not sure who won the championship last season, but do you think there's going to be the guys to challenge Adam Blocker for the next kind of few rounds?
Yeah, especially considering that, again, Burton, Asher, Bennett were all involved in a big mess at the start of the race, and they couldn't really fight with Blocker. But these guys are really, really close on pace. And of course, there is this wild card, of course, because even if you are a road specialist, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 ovals and 6 roads. So no matter what is your specialty, you need to do well in 2 rounds on the opposite side of things, no? Because you need 8 races to have the minimum participation to be in contention for the championship. So really, we don't know, especially since one of the road courses is going to be Homestead, which means, of course, that is a big part of the track will be on the oval. So I'm not ready just yet to say that Blocker will walk home with the title. Certainly, he had the perfect start thanks to this victory, and his teammates, his rivals eliminating themselves. But the same could happen to him, and especially on the ovals, it's really, really unpredictable. And on the ovals, we see some names that usually tend not to race on road courses, and so those are really, really wild cards that can put, spoil the plans of even the best of drivers.
Yeah, it will be a terrific season coming up. Of course, 11 weeks once again still to go in that championship, and Pocono coming up. Just looking at the rest of the calendar, and yeah, it's really looking very exciting. So you've got Spa in them, like you said, double header at Homestead, Motegi being included, and Michigan to round off the season. I mean, I can't imagine IndyCars around Spa, to be honest. That's week 3 of the season, so only a couple of weeks away, 22 laps for that. Is that a track that the series usually visits?
No, but I raced there in the Open Series many moons ago. I'm talking about 2 years ago in real time, real life, you know. And it's a beautiful track, I have to say. It works very well with the IndyCar, and the push to pass on the Camel Straight will be something to behold. So really excited. I talking with Adam Blocker. Uh, he said that the community asked for the race at Spa to be on Christmas week, so again there could be some cross participation from say the 3.5 or the old guys of the the Williams series, the Grand Prix series, or what was the MP4-30 series. So we might see a almost an all-star kind of race because everyone has a Spa, and most everyone has the IR18, the IndyCar, so it could be a very very high strength of field, and plus it's Christmas week, and not only it is Christmas week, but it is also on the 27th of December, which is basically the first day where you don't have to deal with with family members, etc. No, because 24, 25, 26 usually are days where you are busy. So on the 27th, if you want to have a nice race with us on Apex, join the 8 GMT IndyCar split at Spa. It will be great.
Absolutely looking forward to seeing that and how the championship evolves. And that was the NTT IndyCar Road Series then. So, just looking forward to next week on iRacing, Marco. Is there any championships that you're looking forward to? I don't think there's any seasons that are getting back underway, unfortunately, due to the fact that, of course, Christmas coming up. So next week, I think, will be the last kind of full week we get of series. But of course, once again, ARLTC will be back. ARL American GT as well will be around, and also believe the season finale of the Rick Take Sports Car Challenge. So will be pretty exciting.
And even though it will not be shown on our channels, we will produce two very special broadcasts coming up in the next few days. They will be on Monday at late night, between Monday and Tuesday, and between Tuesday and Wednesday. And they will be on Monday night. We are going to have the basically last chance race for the Dinner with Racers Continental Tire Cup. It's a race where there's the last few places to get into the showdown, the final race. That will start at 3 a.m. In Italy, 2 a.m. GMT. Then, more or less, we will have the Skip Barber at Indianapolis. So it will be a repeat of the very first Dinner with Racers event. And then the next day, the Dinner with Racers World Final, also in prime time, US time, HPD and Legends at Monza Oval to determine the winner of the Dinner with Racer Continental Tire Cup, which started all the way back early in 2019. So it will be, a proper conclusion to a long and hard season. And it's very very late for us in Europe, but I volunteer to do it because I love this series, and it gave me some of the biggest accomplishments as a commentator. Doing a broadcast with the Taylor brothers was certainly the highlight of my career, and so why not bring it on with the final two races of the season? Also, the finale is at Monza, so I couldn't say no.
Of course. Yeah, some fantastic formats that series has put together. We also featured at number 2 in the Not iRacing highlights of November a couple of weeks ago. Well, I say a couple of weeks ago, I mean like a couple of days ago. With the 4 hours of Talladega in the MX5s, with an almighty crash happening on the very last lap of the race. That was lots of fun commentating on that one with Alex Simpson and Mark Fletcher. So yeah, has been a superb season for the Dinners with Racers, and some insane formats, but they do look pretty well. I mean, Williams F1 car at Eldora, why not? So I think that is pretty much me and Mark are going to wrap up. So thank you for tuning into this podcast, and we'll see you for another one next week. You've been listening to the Apex Racing TV Weekly Roundup podcast. Make sure to keep up with all our series via YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Also check out the iRacing Esports Network, where we broadcast several days a week. See you next week for another podcast.